Welcome back to Knowledge is Kings, guys. I'm Kings, and the holiday season is over, but you may have some cards to display that friends and family have sent. I mean, I don't, but you probably do. The shelf I want to build, however, will be multi-purpose. When it's a holiday, I can use a festive background, but out of any major season, it can be used without adornment. Let's get to it. I start by cutting almost all the pieces but the sides to length. Then I rip them to size on the table saw. I set the table saw at 45 degrees. It was then I realized the scrap piece that I chose was too narrow, so I had to glue another piece to it. Once that was set up, I cut an angle on one side at the table saw. I had more footage of ripping all the pieces, but for some reason it was corrupted. All there was sound. Oh well. For one of the background options on this shelf, I cut a nativity scene on the CNC. For a more manual way to make cutouts like this, watch my candy cane tray video. Once that was cut out, I clamped the top shelf piece to the workbench just so it wouldn't move on me, and I screwed the background piece on. Once that's on, I flip it over and set the back shelf piece on flush to the back of the background and trace its position. This line is where I will place a small block to screw things into. As you can see, that block is pretty crooked, so I had to put quite a few screws in there to straighten it out. Then I screw the back shelf piece on. Before I glue the front piece on, I want to make sure my ball bearings will fit in appropriately. And of course it didn't work out. When trying to figure out what went wrong, I checked the length and the width of each piece and checked them with my plan, and they seemed to be right, so then I checked the thickness of each piece. Here's the front piece. Then the top piece. And finally the back piece. Now I need to check them to the plans I made. So the top was supposed to be 3/4, as was the back piece. And the front was supposed to be 1/2 inch thick. So I forgot to mill down any of my scraps and couple that with the angles, and all my pieces are wrong. Yeah, you'll have that on these big jobs. Once I did it all over again, actually following the plan this time, I decided to test it again before gluing the front piece on, and this time it worked out perfectly. I glued the front piece with CA glue and accelerant because it would be hard to clamp this weird angle, and I didn't want any nails in the front. I want to make a notch in the front edge so that cards can lean at an angle without falling off. So I take the background piece off the shelf and put a saw curve in at the table saw set at a slight angle. I need to make sides for this shelf so the bearing that I'll be using don't fall out. To do that, I resaw a small piece of walnut in half at the bandsaw, then send it through the planer to get it to the thickness I want. I only need to use one of the two pieces I made. I take the shelf and set it on the thin piece of wood and trace out where I need to cut. At the miter saw, I don't typically use a laser because its position changes depending on how close the blade is to the material, but I do love to use it for angles. If the laser is parallel to the blade, I can use the laser lined up with the marks to get whatever angle I need without actually having to know what that angle is. Now this angle should be 45, but I go by the tracing I made to be precise. Once that piece is cut, I glue it on. Then I flip the shelf around and fill it with bearings. Once it is full, I glue the other side on to keep the ball bearings in place. When the sides were on, I lifted the piece up and looked in the small gap where the cards would go and noticed that some of the bearings had staggered inside, allowing more to fit inside than I needed. So I drilled a hole in the back to take a few of the bearings out. Once I have the amount that I need inside, it was time to sand the entire project. Once sanded, I added a coat of Odie's oil to make it look nice and seal it up. It probably would have been a good idea to coat the inside of the pieces before I glued it together, as now I had no way of getting inside. I decided to paint the nativity scene black as a silhouette. You'll see later that my wife painted the star yellow to give the scene a little life. I chucked up a key slot bit into the router to make slots for hanging the shelf on the wall. I have the feather board there just as a stop block. I drop the shelf into the bit, pull it towards me, and then reverse all actions. Push it back and lift it back up where I put it down. This makes a slot that a screw can enter, move up, and be stuck in place. I make another hole that is exactly 16 inches from center to center of the last hole. This is because the center to center dimensions of houses in the States are 16 inches. This way, it can be firmly attached to the walls without the need for special anchors. I made a cut in a scrap piece so you can see what the inside of the cut looks like. For a screw, you can use a very wide power head screw. The placement of the screw needs to be precise, but it holds very well. You could also use a multi-purpose screw that has a considerably smaller head, but the placement of the screw doesn't need to be as accurate. Or for my favorite, you can use a cabinet screw that is small, but with a very large flat head, giving the best of both options. Once I have screws in the wall, I can hang the shelf. For this shelf, you could use it just as a shelf and keep notes in it, or if you have kids, all their little to-do list could be inserted at the beginning of each day. They'd love that. Or you could use it to show off all your Christmas cards. I like that one. You could also have it set up for all the Valentines you'll be getting in a couple of months. I jumped the gun and put all of mine up here already that I expect to get. But that looks a little bare, so I'll put some more on there of other ones I had to purchase myself. This project was based on those little bars you see in restaurants that they put their order receipts in. I like the ease at which the notes could be put in and removed in those, and this is my variation on it. This one was placed next to my computer where I can keep notes and future project ideas in it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a like as it really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you won't miss future videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, I like that!